Hello and welcome to the program which looks at the Holy Land. I am Paul Calvert. Psalm 89 verse 1 from the New King James Bible says this: I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. With my mouth will I make known your faithfulness to all generations. I'm with Nicole Yoder from the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem. Now, you have a special working at Kibbutz Be'eri. It was attacked on October the 7th. How devastating was that attack?
Well, it's really good to be with you. The attack on Be'eri was very devastating. I can't tell you the exact number of homes that were destroyed. I don't remember those numbers, but there are entire neighborhoods or sections of the kibbutz that were destroyed, houses burned, and roofs caved in, and it was a very, very devastating and awful attack. 10% of the community was wiped out in the massacre that happened there. It was very, very devastating.
Wow. And how big is Kibbutz Be'eri?
Kibbutz Be'eri has about 1,200 residents, but on the 7th of October, 101 were murdered.
Wow. And what sort of things are you doing there to restore the hope?
So obviously the community was evacuated immediately, or on the 7th, 8th, of the days surrounding the attack. And they were moved as a group to the Dead Sea. And so immediately after they were evacuated and it became known what had happened, obviously we were doing everything that we could in a lot of different directions to help people who had been affected. And so, for instance, in the early days, they needed to have a classroom for their small children, to set up a learning center for them. And so we did that for the small children. And there were other things that needed to happen, like for families whose homes were completely destroyed, providing some first kind of funding to help them with replenishing items that were destroyed. So there's just different ways throughout the months and years that we've been helping. But today what we're doing is we're helping in the rebuilding process. So the community is currently not on the kibbutz still till today.
Wow. It's 2 years after.
That's right, 2 years after. One of the remarkable things about Kibbutz Be'eri is they have one of the largest printing presses in Israel. And within a week of this just horrific attack, they reopened the printing house and decided that they were going to continue keeping that work going. And that's one of the things that allowed some of the activity in the kibbutz to return relatively early, even though most of the people were evacuated. There was, in the beginning year or two, only about 100 people that had been living there. And some of the activities surrounding the printing house, like the dining hall needing to open and different things, that did reopen because of the printing house being open. They've remained a very tight-knit community all through this time. And as a kibbutz that remains kind of in the old structure of the socialist kibbutz, they do their decisions together, they live together, they stay together. This has been a part of their process, and deciding how to move forward is who's going to return. I think the majority of the community will return when they're able to, but there needs to be a lot of rebuilding before that can happen.
I imagine when you're evacuated from an area, your life is turned upside down because your kids will go to school, they're not in school now. You maybe have a job down there, a business down there, all these sort of things. How do they live if their life is turned upside down?
Well, that's a very good question. It's been a very big challenge because, as I said, part of the community went ahead and started going back to work at the printing house. Of course, that also sustains people from the surrounding area who don't live on the kibbutz. What they did is they relocated to the Dead Sea for, over a year, I believe. And then, in the meantime, they were building a temporary neighborhood for them in Kibbutz Hatzerim. And the whole community, or most of the community, moved to Kibbutz Hatzerim. They reestablished the kindergartens for the kids, educational frameworks for their children, and they reestablished community life there. And then, but it's been difficult because some were at the kibbutz with the printing house and other things. So you have to just travel to work from wherever you're evacuated from because there just literally aren't homes to return to. Already in June of 2024, they broke ground on a new neighborhood to begin to rebuild the private homes. The neighborhood that was destroyed is set to be demolished next month. And the new neighborhoods are already in process, so that will make it possible for people to come back.
Are they going to leave one or two houses as a testimony to what happened so that people can go down there and see, or is it going to be all totally destroyed?
That was a big question. I believe they're going to save at least one home. I don't think it's going to be left in its location. I think that will probably be moved, although all of those things were, very heart-wrenching discussions among members of the community. Because, of course, as you can imagine, when you're deciding together as a community, there's going to be a range of opinions and feelings, and especially when you're dealing with such a lot of trauma. So I think what's coming about is likely one house at least will be saved, but not necessarily kept inside the kibbutz. It might be moved elsewhere.
Now, for going back, you're going back to an area that's very close to Gaza. Will people go back, or will they have a sense of fear? Well, what if this happens again? So will you see everybody going back to the Kibbutz Be'eri when it's actually totally renovated?
It's been a big question for a lot of people, and I think in general, for the people in Eshkol and Sha'ar Negev and the different communities that were attacked, it took a while to really even understand what happened to them, and to try to understand what they feel about going back and whatnot. In Kibbutz Be'eri specifically, I think something like 80% are planning to return to Kibbutz Be'eri. That's a pretty high number. Some other communities are much less, or somewhere, between half and that number. But Kibbutz Be'eri, a relatively high percentage, as I understand it, plan to return. One of the things that really stood out to me about the resilience of this specific community was at the groundbreaking ceremony back in June 2024. I specifically remember one of the community leaders asking his community a question. And he said something along these lines. He said, "We thought that the pioneering generation was past and that those days were done." He said, "But today we have to make a decision. We have to decide, who are we going to be? In the history books, 50 years from now, are we going to be listed as the next generation of pioneers? Are we going to be the ones that are going to lead the kind of regeneration from this catastrophe? Or are we going to be the espresso generation that takes the easy route?" And he was basically challenging them that we don't want to lose what our parents and grandparents have bequeathed to us. And we don't want to, we want to honor all that those we have lost. And so now it's time to roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Has it been good for the International Christian Embassy to work with the community there?
It's been amazing. When I heard that speech, I felt challenged and inspired. And I thought to myself, okay, yes, it is. It's time to roll up our sleeves and get to work. And I want to do something to stand alongside of them. This is a community that's only 4 kilometers from the border. There's not any change in its location. It takes a lot of courage to get back up after such an event and to say, no, we're going to rebuild. We're going to reclaim our lives. We're going to look towards the future with hope. And it shows a tremendous amount of resilience, and I'm really proud to be working alongside of them to do just that.
Are they telling you their stories, and what are they sort of saying?
We've been involved in the South already for a long time. But with Kibbutz Be'eri, this has been a closer working together than, in the past we didn't work as closely with them. We had placed a shelter there. We have a shelters project where we place protective shelters in public places. And so it had happened that we had done that also in Be'eri. But really, since this happened, we've developed a much closer connection. And yes, we've been through there many, many times, also with different groups and people. And we've heard personal stories of many of the people. And so it's really made a heart connection.
It must be quite emotional just listening to their stories about what's happened.
Absolutely. Just was with some friends there not long ago. And we heard from one of the residents in his own home exactly what happened that morning and his whole thought process and how he was rescued. And standing there in his home, seeing how it was completely devastated and burnt out and imagining what it would have been like for him that day, it's very emotional.
How important is this work, and is it restoring hope?
So one of the first times that I went to the kibbutz, and they were explaining to me and showing me what had happened, there was a place in the center of the kibbutz where they have 3 kindergartens, one next to the other with the playground. And next to those was the dental clinic, which was the site of one of the really iconic battles that happened on the 7th. It was very challenging in that area at that time. And only 2 people survived there. And on the other side of the kindergartens was a completely destroyed building. It was a kind of youth activity center for third and fourth graders. And the whole building was completely destroyed. The only thing that was left standing was like a shelter, like a protective shelter. And what I understood is this area was used by the terrorists in pretty large numbers as a kind of a meeting point. And so that's why that building was so completely destroyed. And they needed to, in the course of the battle. And so I really had it in my heart when I saw that I wanted to, with the Christian Embassy and our friends around the world, I wanted to stand with them and help them specifically in rebuilding that building. And so in our talks together, we agreed that that's what would happen. And so today, we're in the process of helping completely rebuild that youth activity center. On the other side of the kindergartens, the dental clinic has been taken down, and they'll have to be rebuilt in another area as part of a medical complex. And we're going to also be helping to rebuild that dental clinic, that wing of the medical complex. And I have to tell you that it's taken quite some time to get to the point where we were ready to start with the actual building. Well, the bulldozer started in December. I was away for some time visiting my family. And when I came back, it's amazing how fast it's been going. The walls are already up. They're starting to put the roof on. And just last week, I believe it was, it was the week before, I had the chance to go and see for the first time the progress that had been made. And I have to tell you honestly, I immediately started crying. There was just something so special about being a part of rebuilding. That's something that's always impressed me about this community. They made a choice right from the beginning. We're going to look forward. Obviously, dealing with so much trauma and grief and standing together has been so inspiring to observe. And there's a lot of emotion to unpack there, but there's also a choice in the middle of this. And the choice is exactly what this leader said at the dedication of the new neighborhoods. We're not going to give up. We're going to look forward, and let's get to it. And so being a part of that is just really emotional. And so when I saw that building going up, it was like, wow, we're doing this. It's one more step towards their return.
Is it coming back bigger and better?
Well, I think it's obviously, that's been the slogan, build back better. You don't want to go back to exactly the way things were before. I think they've always said that they want people to feel like there's been a significant investment. The community is a huge draw, but also, are we meeting the needs of the community right now? The needs of the community changed since the 7th. There are, just recognizing the trauma and the devastation that happened. You have to plan now to address the needs of trauma alongside of, like the third project at Be'eri, for instance, is to renovate a rehabilitation and occupational center for the elderly. Well, a great many of the people that were lost on the 7th were from the older generation. And so how do we meet their needs now, which are different than they were maybe before this happened? So in that sense, yes, you're working to improve things, but to also meet the needs of the community now and on into the future.
Are they getting the counseling support that they need?
They are getting counseling support, definitely. That's been a part of the process. Whether it's enough, I don't know how to say. I think that's something that you see one step at a time, and hopefully they will continue to get it into the future, and there could always be more done, because I know that all the regions in the South that were affected, the needs in terms of health care, like mental health care and support and counseling support, are 10 times what they were. In other words, every resilience center in the South, if they had 300, kind of people coming on a regular basis for support before October 7th, it's now like 3,000, or roughly in those kinds of numbers. And so there has to be a tremendous emphasis on this.
Now, there are other communities in the South that were devastated on October the 7th. Which other areas are you working in, and what are you doing there?
We are also really privileged to be working with Kibbutz Kfar Aza. It's another one of the hard-hit kibbutzim. And again, just everything that I mentioned to you just now about the need to consider trauma and the needs of the community going forward, that's exactly what Kfar Aza was asking as well. They said, we know that we need to deal with this. We need to help our children and our elderly and obviously the whole community, but there are some more vulnerable age groups that they really want to focus on. So, for instance, in Kfar Aza, the request was to assist with renovating one of the kindergarten spaces, also turning it into a response to the trauma of the children so they could go for therapeutic visits and receive the help that they need. But also right in the center of the kibbutz, there's an older building that needs to be remodeled, and the purpose of that is going to be a music therapy center for individual and group therapy. And I'm really seeing that as an opportunity for communal events. It's about building resilience and coming together and creating music, which is a way of processing grief, but it's also a way of looking forward in hope. And so we're going to be helping them with remodeling that space to turn it into a music therapeutic center, but also a kind of a communal space. And I'm really excited about that project because that's another kibbutz that was hit very hard. They had about 950 residents, and they lost, I believe it was like 64 of their residents on the 7th.
You are the International Christian Embassy. What does the community think when Christians are coming to help them?
Well, I have heard from them a number of times. I just can't believe all that you're doing here to help us. And yeah, I think sometimes it might be a little surprise sometimes on the one hand. On the other hand, I felt that they were very, very appreciative. And I think in general, when Israel looked around the world, when Israelis looked around the world, and maybe particularly in the South, it hit harder. There were so many communities around the world that were immediately kind of, demonstrating against Israel, and they maybe didn't take the time and the effort to really understand fully. And there's been a lot of false information, twisted information. And Israel very quickly around the world started being accused of all kinds of things. And so I think when they see friends that come in the midst of that and aren't immediately jumping to negative conclusions and who want to actually help with them and walk alongside of them, it's something that's a real encouragement. And because not to have that, you need friends around you in times of crisis, and otherwise it's quite lonely, no?
Yeah, it must be quite difficult for them personally because they've been through such a terrible attack and a terrible ordeal, and it's the worst terrorist attack on Israeli soil, and yet the whole world has turned against them. And it must be just really hard to feel that, well, who's with us?
Absolutely. Very, very devastating. And things that you would think would be just completely, you would have the support of the world in such a moment. And to not have it, to suddenly find out that you don't have it, it was quite shocking for them.
Why do you do what you do?
Wow. Why do I do what I do? It really boils down to the fact that as a Christian, I feel like I have gained so much from the Jewish people. We share the Bible, and so it's because of my faith. I want to bless this nation that I have been so blessed by.
Does it feel like sometimes you're going out to give to them, but you're actually getting more back in return?
I am absolutely gaining so much in return, and it has been such an honor and such a amazing thing to develop relationships throughout this land, to connect Christians from around the world with the people here. They're amazing, and I'm excited to see all that's happening here.
What is your prayer for the communities in the South?
My prayer is that they will indeed be able to return home in safety, be able to rebuild their lives, rebuild hope, rebuild families, and that they would indeed be able to look forward to the future with hope. And I really believe that there is a good future.
Well, Nicole, thank you very much for sharing today.
Thank you. It's been really wonderful to share with you.
Thank you for joining us today. Pray that God will move by his mighty power in the Holy Land and bring his peace.